Yeah. So I got a package coming, so that's why I'm sitting at the front here. Oh shit. Okay. Uh, Moving on to the topic today. So scheduling. I'm thinking every Wednesday, maybe for a video upload, at least at the very least, at least once a week, I guess. We'll see how that goes. So anyway, we go to the topic of today, right? We're talking about Japan and China. Well, it'll be kind of a comparison. We'll be reading article. My face will be in it, so you can focus on the article itself. So in the 80s and 90s, we know Japan took a neoliberal turn for the West. But that happened. If you watch the Princess of Yen documentary on YouTube, that happened prior to the Plaza Accord, which is pretty much world famous now. But people often cite the Plaza Accord as the exact turning point. But it was actually prior to that, there were a few events, which is not common knowledge at all in the banking sector of Japan and everything. And the people who did this stuff, well, not did this stuff, but the people who worked there, when they, in the documentary, when they admitted to this, the stuff they did, they needed to cover up their face and everything. So it's a pretty controversial decision, and if they showed their identity, all the streets would, if they see them, they wouldn't let them go in peace. So it was a very controversial decision they made, and they know the consequences of what they did. They're well aware of what they did. This is not like the disconnect that the rich have with the working class in any country and stuff like that. These guys are well aware of the suffering they've caused and stuff like that, and they know if they go out in the open, they don't have any kind of protection against that. But I'm going off topic with that anyway. So in Japan, we see, it's a really popular country, if you want to call it that. We see the facade of Japan as a really futuristic, high-tech society with it's really developed, and it's a developed country. Like, if I was to compare it to, say, America, for example, I would say for a fact that it's more developed than America. But there's more, the parts we don't see, right? Like the homelessness, just the lack of growth, I guess, GDP growth, you could say, at first glance. That's all the stuff you see at the very few like the infrastructure that is starting to decay away, which if you go outside the big cities, you should be able to notice in Japan. And there's not much, what's it called, refurbishing it. And that's the visible signs of the decay of a neoliberal society. There's also other not so visible stuff like privatizations and what else? So like welfare policies being cut down and stuff like that. So yeah, let's get into this. Here we are. Why is Japan so bitter about the unstoppable rise of China? The article may be misleading because I don't think Japan even cares at this point, because if they did, they would actually work on improving themselves, the livelihoods of their people, which is no longer the case. And so we see like this is some of the visible stuff we see in Japan. We see in many neoliberal economies that we see even in economies that took the neoliberal turn. Now, my mentor actually stated that an investment credit creation or former investment credit creation economy like Japan, when it takes when it turns into a neoliberal economy, that's actually worse than an economy that was already always neoliberal. That could be the case here. So here this is the author's personal experience. 2 years ago, I noticed. So there used to be a pair of beautiful swings for children not far from an old rural temple in Mie Prefecture, where I used to frequently power walk when searching for inspiration for my novels. So this guy's lived in Japan for a while at least. 2 years ago, I noticed that the swings had gotten rusty, abandoned, and unkept. Yesterday, I spotted a yellow ribbon encircling and therefore closing the structure down. It appears that the decision had already been made to get rid of the playground irreversibly. So, once again, a feature of a neoliberal economy, a visible feature is the decay of social areas, infrastructure, whatever, And it has to be shut down because no one's maintaining it anymore. When it's privatized, right? This should be common knowledge. Unfortunately, it isn't. When it's privatized, the company, believe it or not, does not have an incentive to actually maintain this stuff because it is not profitable. I mean, how profitable is a park for kids? Not very profitable, is it? All right, so moving on. One day earlier, I observed an old homeless man sleeping right under a big sign which is advertising a cluster of luxury eateries at the lavish Nagoya train station. So another visible sign. We all know this deep inequality where you see like masses of homeless. We see this in America quite often, actually. Masses of like in the strip or something, LA strip or something. Vegas strip hotel. Yeah, like masses of homeless people. Not in Vegas, actually. In California, any place in California, masses of homeless people in the richest state in the country. I'm sure there's many homeless people in Vegas as well. That's even more of a disparity, though. And in the city of Yokkaichi, which counts some 350,000 people, almost all but very few bus lines had disappeared. What had already disappeared was an elegant and unique shining zodiac, which used to be engraved into the marble promenade right in front of the Kintitsu Line train station. The fast ferry across the bay connecting Yokkaichi with Central Air International Airport that serves Nagoya, blah blah blah, stop operating. Once again, all this because it's not profitable. As a municipal subsidies dried up. So, revenue stream for the local governments drying up. Just due to a lack of growth. But that's a simplistic explanation. There's a multitude of factors at play there, but it's all related to neoliberalism. Now people have to drive some 70 kilometers all around the bay, burning fuel and paying exorbitant highway tolls and airport parking fees to make it to their flight. What used to constitute public spaces or even just rice fields is rapidly being converted into depressing parking lots. It is happening in central Japan, but also far southwest. So that's more of the car culture that's getting because of the lack of public transport investment, or rather like the shutdown of most of the public transport that used to be there. People are taking to cars, and possibly you have to pay for these to park there as well. So obviously the company who is operating this stuff is having quite the profit there. Another visible thing: homeless people are everywhere. So I didn't know this, but Japan. This was written in 2019. I don't know if it's still the case, but Japan had more cars per capita than the United States at that point. Are rotting in the middle of, so their car, a lot of the cars wherever he lives are rotting in the middle of rice fields and at the edges of once pristine forests as they lose value rapidly. And it costs a lot of money to get rid of them properly. So people just, people don't have much savings. Despite this being a culture that saves a lot, pretty much all Asian cultures do a lot of are into saving their whatever money there for the future, and it shows that cost of living is so high, and wage growth is so low that it's eating into their savings, and they just don't have enough money to even get rid of cars. No. Entire rural villages are being depopulated, in fact turning into ghost towns. There's rust, bad planning, and an acute lack of anything public all over the country. Rural villages being depopulated. Now, this is for neoliberal economies. What's happening here is that it's too expensive to actually raise a family in the country. So people are just not getting. The population growth starts to stagnate, and the population gets older, and then eventually the older generations die out, and that's how we lose all the villages and stuff. And you can find a lot of these in Japan. I mean, it's been almost 40 years, 40 years of neoliberalism in Japan, and 40 years of investment creation in China, but we'll get to that later. So, as the author correctly points out here, Japan is in decay. For many years, it was possible to ignore it as a country was due to inertia hanging on to the top spot of the richest nation on earth. But not anymore. The deterioration is now just too visible. So Japan at this point is approaching, like Americans being neoliberalism for much longer, actually. But Japan is starting to visibly appear, like the cracks you see within the facade of this rich nation narrative, just like America. If you go to America, you don't think it's a rich country. When you go to Japan, the effect is not as strong, but you start to notice it's not as rich as it's portrayed to be. Yeah, as the author rightly points out here, it's not as the decay is not as drastic as you observe in France, the United States, or the UK, but you can still see it. The optimistic, heady days of nation building are over. So this is the high growth era he's talking about. This post-war Japan reconstruction through investment credit creation. The automobile industry, so as to how the reconstruction through investment credit creation happened, do watch my The Hidden History of Japan series. I'll have some cards up there. Moving on, the automobile industry and other corporations are literally cannibalizing the country, dictating its lifestyle. In small cities, motorists do not yield on pedestrian crossings anymore. Cars are prioritized by urban planners, and some urban planners are paid bribery by the car industry. Many areas can now only be reached by cars. There are hardly any public exercise machines and almost no new parks. Japan, which prides itself on producing some of the most refined food, is now fully overwhelmed by several chains of convenience stores, which are full of unhealthy foodstuff. For generations, people were sacrificing their lives in order to build a prosperous, powerful, and socially balanced Japan. Now there's no doubt that the citizens are there mainly to support powerful corporations, or in short, big business. So same case as in America. Japanese used to have its own distinct model, but now the lifestyle is not too different from that could be observed in North America or Europe. So basically, everyone of us who lives in a neoliberal society that is not rich, we basically have a similar lifestyle, to put it really simplistically, or the vast majority of us do. For the second time in its history, Japan has been forced to open to the world, vested interest in the global capitalist economy, and to accept a concept that used to be thoroughly alien to the Asian culture. Consequences were quick to arrive. In summary, they have been thoroughly disastrous. So he's talking about I'm assuming the PASA Code, because I have not read this book or whatever that is. After World War II, Japan had to accept occupation. The constitution was written by the US, defeated but determined to rebuild and join the ranks of the richest countries on earth. Japan began collaborating with the West, first supporting the brutal invasion of Korea. It totally gave up on its independence, fully surrendering its foreign policy, which gradually became indistinct from that of the United States in particular, and the West in general. The mass media has been, since the end of the war, to now controlled and censored by the regime in Tokyo. Major newspapers, as well as the Japanese national broadcaster NHK, would never dare to broadcast or publish any important international news. I don't know if that's true, but the author has lived in Japan for a while. Unless at least one major US or British mainstream media outlet had set the tone and an example of how the story should be covered by the mass media in the client states. Oh yeah, that's true, yeah. I was too quick to jump on the... In this respect, the Japanese media is not different from its counterparts in countries such as Indonesia or Kenya. Japan is also not definitely a democracy, if democracy simply means the rule of the people. Traditionally, Japanese people used to live mainly in order to serve the nations, which is perhaps not such a bad concept. It used to work, at least for the majority. However, now they're expected to sacrifice their lives slowly for the profits of corporations. So in summary, Japan never really had independence. It was allowed to grow for a brief while, possibly to contain the spread of communism from places like China and Russia and stuff. So they allowed Japan to grow using its own unique model, which is investment credit creation. And investment credit creation produced incredibly rapid growth. But once it got a bit too big for American comfort, the Americans decided to pull the plug. Okay, so people in Japan do not rebel even when they are robbed by their rulers. They are shockingly submissive. So this is kind of true for all neoliberal countries, to be honest. Not just Japan. Japan is not only in decay, it tries to spread its failure like an epidemic. It is actually spreading and glorifying its submissive, subservient foreign and domestic policies. Through scholarships, it is continuously indoctrinating and effectively intellectually castrating tens of thousands of willing students from the poor Southeast Asian nations and other parts of the world. All right, now to the China segment, which is what I think you all have been waiting for. In the meantime, China, which is literally next door, is leading in scientific research in urban planning and in social policies, with ecological civilization now part of its constitution. It is way ahead of Japan in developing alternative sources of energy, public transportation, as well as organic food production. By 2020, there will be no pockets of extreme poverty on the entire huge territory of China. So the author's right on target, actually, because 2021, because of COVID in 2020, extreme poverty alleviation had to be delayed a bit. So 2021, or I should say at the end of 2020, actually, or the start of 2021. But anyway, extreme poverty in a continental-sized country has been eliminated, right? Bigger than all of the West. Now, if you put all the West together and count the amount of poor people, amount of people in extreme poverty, it's bigger than China now. That's pretty crazy, and they have 900 million people, I believe, yeah, altogether the West. And China's PPP per capita, that is its purchasing power parity per capita, is only 20,000, which is only a little bit less than half of that of Japan. And yet it's already this far ahead. It's already pulling way ahead of Japan. Now, interesting comparison would be, say, if Japan never abandoned investment credit creation to this day, how economically powerful would it be? I'd say almost GDP, nominal GDP of close to 20 trillion, a PPP, GDP PPP close to that as well. Still smaller than China, but comparable to America, which is pretty crazy. And probably still ahead of China in all these fields, I would say. Because China's a latecomer, In East Asia, China's a latecomer compared to Japan, South Korea. But they've pulled ahead now because China is still using investment credit creation, and I don't see them abandoning it anytime in the future. Moving on, and in China, it is all done under the red communist manners, which the Japanese public has been taught to despise and reject. Tremendous Chinese determination, zeal, genius, and social spirit are evidently superior compared to the sclerotic, conservative, and revanchist spirit of modern Japan. I'd never even heard of these words before. And of its handlers in the West. Their contrast is truly shocking and very clearly detectable even with unarmed eyes. So, yeah, the way Japan and the West, they have really conservative attitude to monetary policy, whereas China is very progressive in that regard. They're not afraid to spend, even on things that might actually fail or are not profitable at all. What does it mean by socialist spirit? To me, the socialist spirit means progressing forward always into the future. That's what it means to me. And that's something you'll never get with the conservative and neoliberal attitude in Japan and the West and whatever, And on the international stage, while Japanese corporations are plundering entire countries and corrupting governments, China is helping to put entire continents back on their feet. So the Belt and Road Initiative, we all know about that, is in good old communist internationalist ideas. Yeah, and the Belt and Road Initiative, in my opinion, such a policy is shaped by the communist and what should I say? Also, the ancient Chinese ideals as well of a harmonious world, which aligns neatly with the communist internationalist ideals, I would say. Now, keep in mind, I'm not a communist, so I don't know about it as much as they would, but that's what I think of it. So we know of the smear campaign against China and all that. So when one speaks to Africans and he or she finds out quickly what goes on, one travels to China and everything becomes even clearer unless one is paid very well not to see, like many of the so-called Western journalists. Yeah, but once I think even a non-believer or a reasonable person, right, who doesn't know anything about Japan, I mean China, wants to learn about China, they just have to go to the country and everything, they start to see everything. Instead of learning and deciding to totally change its economic, social system, Japan is turning to a sore loser. It hates China for succeeding under its independent policies and under its communist placards. It hates China for building new and beautiful cities designed for the people. It hates China even for doing its best to save the environment as well as the countryside. And it hates China for being fully independent politically and socially, even academically. Now, whether Japan hates China for all that, I don't really agree. I think they don't want the Japanese government doesn't want the Japanese people to see that the model that they previously used. So, as we know, China is a investment credit creation economy. Japan was formerly. They don't want people to know that this system, this system what it's actually capable of, that it can save that country, because it's not profitable for the ruling class. It's all about profit at the end of the day. The China model, don't rich people don't really profit at all from it. The reason you see so many rich people in China is because of the huge scale of the economy and the amount of people in it. So that's a different topic for another day. So China tried playing footsies with the Western academia, but the game almost turned deadly, leading to ideological infiltration and the near collapse of China's intellectual independence. I believe the reason for this is because China did this too early, I would say, at its stage of development, and should have waited probably far later than it did what it did. But at least the danger was identified, and Western subversion was quickly stopped. Just 5 minutes to midnight, so to speak, before it was too late. In Japan, submission and collaboration with the Western global imperialist regime is worn as some code of honor. Japanese graduates of various universities framed their diplomas and hanged them on the wall as if it's great proof of their success. Instead of collaboration with the system which is running almost, I think he meant to say collaborating with the system which is running the entire planet. Yeah. But yeah, I agree. It's because Japan is not really an independent country. A lot of people hate on Japan, but really we should look at who actually controls the country, which is the US. I remember some 15 years ago, so this is the author's personal experience. Chinese tourists would stand on the bullet train platforms all over Japan with their cameras ready, dreaming. When trains would pass, they'd say. Probably because it was a completely new thing to them back then. So yeah, now we know about China's bullet train system, most advanced and the largest in the world. Cheaper and more comfortable than the Japanese or French ones. Yeah, and We got more of the authors. Uh, yeah, a lot of the observations you see from Chinese people back then, like 15 years ago or so, and to them now. Yeah, Chinese brands, Huawei, and other Chinese brands are better than Apple now. And back then, Chinese tourists were impressed with Japan, modern architecture, and all that. How developed the country was in general. Now, the cultural life of Beijing and Shanghai is incomparably richer than that of Tokyo or Osaka. Architecture in China is much more impressive, I agree. There are innovations in both the urban and rural life in China that are still far from being implemented in Japan, I agree. I was impressed if you watch a lot of YouTube channels that with walking through Chinese cities or rural areas even. I was impressed with the kind of innovations, if you will. I don't know if they were a thing in other countries, but I was impressed with what I saw during the poverty alleviation program in rural areas in China. And they're putting the newest technologies and stuff, innovations and everything, improvements, whatever you want to call it, in these in the poorest regions in China. And you don't. That's really like a socialist, progressive mentality. I think it's hard to explain, but you won't see that in neoliberal or capitalist or whatever you want to call it countries like Japan. And you see more of the decay in Japan, with public playgrounds being abandoned and converted into parking lots. China is building new parks, huge and small, covering river and lake areas, turning them into public spaces. I think he's talking about anime here, but China is placing witty and educative cartoons speaking about social virtues, solidarity, compassion, and equality at many arteries, even at the metro trains. Ecological civilization is advertised basically everywhere. I don't know if it could be true. I haven't been to China, but that makes sense. Japanese people are increasingly gloomy. This is just people in all neoliberal countries, not just Japan, to be honest. But in China, confident smiles are seen at each and every step. Because the reason because is they have hope for the future. They have ambition to be something greater than cogs in a machine, And you can't say the same for people in neoliberal countries. They don't have any hope for the future. They don't have any ambition. Kids in the West want to be a YouTuber or working as some kind of tradie like plumber or something like that, And it's really sad to see. But we see the same thing in Japan. China is rising, it is unstoppable. Not because of its economic growth, but because the quality of the life of the citizens is going steadily up. I want to add that the economic growth is the primary reason as to why the quality of life for the Chinese citizens is going up. And it's not going steadily up, it's going rapidly up, And it's just going to keep going faster and faster. And that is all that really matters, isn't it? We can clearly improve the life of people under a tolerant, modern, communist system. As long as people smile, as long as they're educated, healthy, and happy, we are clearly winning. So yeah, this is a common scene across Japan. Yes, yeah. This is what I was talking about earlier. Some individuals are still chasing those magic images of pristine Japanese forests and lakes. Yes, they're still there if you search very hard. Tea rooms and trees, lovely creeks, but you have to work very hard. You have to edit and search for the perfect shots as Japanese cities and countryside adorned with rotten cars and weird metal beams, with unkept public spaces, with ugly electric wires hanging everywhere. As long as money can be saved, as long as there's profit, anything goes. Yeah, that's exactly the previous thing I was talking about. It's not profitable to clean all this shit up. See, it's not profitable to get rid of this. So really, nothing's gonna change anytime soon, as long as Japan stays neoliberal. And that people find it hard to formulate their feelings on the subject. But in summary, they feel frustrated that the country they used to occupy and torture is doing much better than their own. To Japanese imperialists, the Chinese were simply subhumans. It is never pronounced, but Japan has only been respecting Western culture and Western power. And now the Chinese subhumans are exploring the bottoms of the oceans, building airplanes, running the fastest trains on Earth, and making wonderful art films. And they set on liberating the oppressed world through its Belt and Road Initiative and through other incredible ideas. So if we're going to see some incredible ideas coming from China in the future. That's why it's such an exciting time to be alive. And what is Japan doing? Selfies and video games, idiotic, meaningless, nihilist cartoons. I assuming he meant anime there. Brainless social media, an enormous avalanche of uninvented pornography, of decorative arts, pop music, and mass-produced cars. As people are depressed, so true, so true. It's so sad to see. It's so sad to see a people who had so much ambition, hope for the future. We're just looking forward, seeing their country getting continuously better. It's just so sad to see. It's become like this, and it's because it really was independent in the first place. It has only allowed that growth to contain the spread of communism. That's what I think. So he's been here for there for 3 decades. I know it intimately, still love it, love many things about it, but I also clearly see that it is changing. In fact, collapsing, and it is refusing to admit it and to change. I work with China because I love where it's going. Yeah, same here. I hope to work with China in the future because I love where it's going. I like its modern communist model. I was never a great supporter of the Gang of Four and the glorification of poverty. I have to agree. I share the same sentiment. Let all Chinese people be rich soon and let the entire oppressed world be wealthy as well. Yeah. That's really what us Eastern leftists want. I think one of the differences is that in the Western left is that there's a lot of, it may be justified, but there's a lot of what's it called, hatred against those who have a lot, or and those who have a lot resources and stuff like that, rich and all that. But really, what the Eastern left, the difference between the left in the East and the West is that the West just wants to, like, I guess they're more harsh. They're not as forgiving. I guess that's how you could say it. If they could, they would probably kill the ruling class, while the left in the East are much more humanistic. They would try to reform, re-educate these people of evil, try to reform and try to lift everyone up. So every person lives a better life, and we give people a different another chance because we believe that they can change, potentially to be better. And that reminds me of what I think it was what, yeah, Mao did with Pui. I think that's how he's pronounced. He was Qing Dynasty's emperor, last emperor of China, and they reformed him and made him into a communist. So that's the kind of change like I believe in as well. I want to give like not to everyone, of course. Some people are just not redeemable at all, but at least to the vast majority of people, want to give them another chance. Right, moving on. But that is not what Japan wants. For some time, it felt unique. It was the only rich Asian country, the only Asian country allowed to be rich by the West. In South Africa, the Japanese people were defined as honorary whites. It's because they had embraced Western culture. Because they did all that. We know that. It was a form of political and moral prostitution, but it paid well, extremely well. So its morality was simply not discussed. It's so true. And now China is getting ahead simply because of its courage, hard work, the genius of its people, and all this under the wise leadership of the Communist Party and its central planning. Precisely under the things that the Japanese people were brainwashed into hating. And also, many people in pretty much all neoliberal countries were brainwashed into hating that. It is frustrating, it is scary that all that submission, humiliation, and bowing to the empire was for nothing. In the end, it is China, it is communism which will win, and which will be doing the greatest service to humanity. So yeah, it's the left. By and large, it's the left that will win. It's the left that will take humanity to the next stage of development. And yes, Japan is frustrated these days. Polls speak of some 80% of the Japanese disliking the Chinese. I don't think the Japanese are very well aware of the development that's going on in Japan. I mean, China, to be honest. I think they just, because of all the anti-China propaganda put out by their ruling class, they hate China because of that. Same case with Americans. As I interact with people from all corners of Japan, I'm getting convinced that the Japanese public subconsciously feels that for decades it has been betting on the wrong horse. It is too proud to verbalize it. It is too scared to fully reflect on it. But life in Japan, at least for many, is clearly becoming meaningless, gloomy, and depressing. And there's no revolution on the horizon as the country was successfully depoliticized. So yeah, I don't. These three traits. So those three traits that are prevalent in Japan is also prevalent in pretty much all neoliberal countries. And the reason there'll be no revolution is that, as the author correctly identifies here, is because the country is being depoliticized. But you never know. He could be wrong. Things could change. Might not even take a revolution. I don't think Japan is as far gone as America, for example. Same with South Korea. These two East Asian countries, they're definitely not as far gone as America. And due to their unique history, they have a history of highly competent leadership, there is a chance a strong man like they formerly had, or strong government like they formerly had, could come into power. Maybe not even to revolution. Is unlike the West. The East is quite different to the West in that regard. But we don't know. I think with China increasing in strength, the likelihood of that happening gets higher and higher. So China is building, inventing, struggling, and marching forward, confidently surrounded by friends, but independently. Japan is tied up and restrained. It cannot move. It doesn't even know how to move, how to resist anymore. And that is why Japan hates China. So whether or not Japan hates China because of that, I I think I have to disagree with the author on that. I think it's purely like because of a profit reason, and the ruling class in Japan knows that, so they're churning out all this proper anti-China propaganda to prevent the people from getting the message, if you know what I mean. But at some point it becomes pretty much impossible to hide, So we'll see how far they go. And and in Japan and South Korea, two countries where there was rapid growth, where people were looking to a brighter future, right? But they were never truly independent. And the people don't realize that. The vast majority of people don't realize that. And it's depressing to see because they have so much potential to be much greater than what they are now. It's just depressing to see that. But I think in time they will see. Because, like, I'd say the turning point is 2030. Because China will be insanely advanced at that point. They can't really hide that kind of reality anymore. It's just impossible to hide. But yeah, we'll see. So yeah, I'll see you guys next time.